Taiwan's military looks to double down on drones to beef up its defenses. Almost 6 years since the Me Too movement exploded across the world, what exactly has changed? We take a look. China and India have been kicking out each other's journalists, but there may be hope for better relations soon. Plus,
a new study on Taipei 101 could help with improving the safety of more common buildings, like these ones.
hello and welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Starting off in local news, Taiwan's been given a new U.S. drone to help its Coast Guard monitor the seas. It's part of a bigger push to invest more in drones for defense. Jaime Ocon explains.
This is the Jump 20. It's a U.S.-made drone and one of the newest tools for Taiwan's defense. Taiwan's Coast Guard says the U.S. has given it one of the drones free of charge and offered training on how to operate it. The drone is meant to help the Coast Guard stop crime at sea, but it's capable of much more.
所以除了它上面的这些就是镜头之外，那它可以载有限的武器，比如说像这一次在乌克兰看到，就是可以载小型的 mortar 的小炮弹或者是手榴弹是可以的。不过它最重要还是说在做侦察的功能。
To fight Russia's invasion, Ukraine has used a variety of drones and unmanned systems. Drones can provide valuable information about the location of enemy forces, and they're also cheap. And for a military like Taiwan's, short on personnel and money, every dollar counts.
I think developing drone is good for our defense because our problem of our defense is we're short of human resource. Our soldiers are not so many, and we don't have sufficient equipment to make our soldiers to guard every position.
Taiwan is not just getting new drones, it's also making the most of the ones it already has. Earlier this year, the military and Taiwan's top weapons maker, the Zhongshan Institute, announced plans to create a drone fleet. They're upgrading existing commercial drones to a military standard and making sure they're battle ready. One of those drones is this Capricorn, a low-altitude aircraft that looks like a mini helicopter. It's already being used by the Army as an eye in the sky to help troops on the ground. Out of the 50 Capricorns to be retrofitted, 14 have already been delivered, and the rest will be finished by the end of this year.
特别的是，它很多技术是来自商用的无人机，所以价格会比较便宜。这是中科院目前可能在结合这个military grade 跟那个 commercial grade 两个把它扛摆起来，原因就在说要做成本的控制。预备，放。
Taiwan is under threat from neighboring China, which has not ruled out the use of force to bring the country under its control. Beijing spends 11 times more on defense than Taipei and has a much larger military. But Taiwan is trying to look further than just numbers. It's betting that smart spending on drones and other tech can help bridge the gap with China's military might. Howard Zhang and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
Meanwhile, Taiwan's military will halt flights at the country's main international airport to carry out war games next month. That's what an unnamed official told the country's central news agency. The source says Taoyuan Airport will feature in the annual Hangguang military exercise for the very first time. Flights in and out will be grounded, but the source says the military aims to limit the disruption to an hour or less. The drill is currently set for July 27th. If China attacks Taiwan, taking control of harbors and airports would be a key goal for Chinese forces. In international news, Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the leaders of the Wagner Mutiny of treason and of wanting to see Russia choked in bloody strife. Bing Wang reports.
In his first address after the attempted mutiny, Russian President Vladimir Putin blasted the organizers, the Wagner Group, calling them traitors to Moscow.
Однако организаторы мятежа, предав свою страну, свой народ, предали и тех, кого втянули в преступление, лгали им, толкали их на смерть под огонь, на то, чтобы стрелять в своих.
Headed by close Putin ally Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner Group is a private military contractor now fighting alongside Russia's soldiers in their war in Ukraine. Over the weekend, Prigozhin and his troops attempted a short-lived revolt against the Russian government, moving a convoy of tanks north to Moscow from the border with Ukraine. It's one of the biggest challenges to Putin's authority in decades, but a deal was struck before Wagner's forces neared the Russian capital. Prigozhin now claims it was a protest action and not a rebellion.
Мы шли для демонстрации своего протеста, а не для свержения власти в стране.
Prigozhin maintains he was only reacting to a government plan to disband his group, but his assertions did not convince Putin.
Хотели, чтобы солдаты России убивали друг друга, чтобы погибли военнослужащие и мирные жители, чтобы в конечном счете проиграла Россия, а наше общество раскололось, захлебнулось в кровавой междоусобице.
The Russian president thanked the leader of neighboring Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, for brokering the deal to resolve the situation. Prigozhin is now said to be headed for Belarus. Putin also gave rank-and-file members of the Wagner group a chance to either continue fighting for Russia, go home, or leave for Belarus. It's unclear how this event will affect the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, but analysts say this attempted revolt indicates a struggle for power within Russia and could lead to Putin losing support in his country. Scott Huang and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
While Russia's rebellion was short-lived, it could have greater effects on relations with countries in the region. For more on this, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Matthew Sussex, a security analyst at the Griffith Asia Institute in Sydney, Australia.
Seeing how things played out in this Wagner rebellion, how do you think Russia's allies, particularly China, how are they reacting to this?
Let's use China as the case study, would be looking at what's going on in Russia and thinking, well, we have this all-encompassing so-called no-limits partnership with the Russian Federation. What happens if Putin goes? And I think, look, generally speaking, the attitude in Zhongnanhai would be, well, kind of more of the same, really. Because let's face it, whoever succeeds Putin is not going to stop needing China all of a sudden. The thing I think that China would be reticent about is political instability and civil unrest. And that's something that this event sort of pointed to, but sort of didn't. Because I think one thing we can say is that there was no sign of a popular revolt or anything like that. This was, a mutiny or an insurrection, much more than it was a revolution or a coup.
And how does this rebellion affect Ukraine's counteroffensive in the sense of Russia's ability to defend against that?
Yeah, I think in the short term, it doesn't actually affect the counteroffensive that much at all, because Wagner troops had been withdrawn from the front. And so the soldiers that the Ukrainians are facing now are the Russian regulars and mobilized troops as well. Where I think it will have an impact will be in the medium term, because I think you can more or less guarantee that there will be a purge of the Russian armed forces and intelligence agencies, probably too, for Wagner sympathizers. And we do know that Wagner did have some degree of support within the Russian armed forces, particularly in middle-ranking officers. And ironically, of course, those are the types of officers who are also the ones that have the most combat expertise. So in that sense, it will deeply affect morale, and it will also deeply affect the ability, I think, of the Russian armed forces to prosecute a defense.
Taking a step back, what lessons can we learn from this 24-hour mutiny, as Putin is calling it?
I think one lesson is worth remembering, and that's that coups sometimes don't start with the intention of being coups. They just get there, or momentum takes over. Often, I think we look at these things as kind of deep Machiavellian plots, when in fact they're not. They're just a sort of triggering event, and then everything steamrolls. I'm not saying that that's completely what happened here, because Prigozhin has signaled this for a while. He has said, if the generals won't give good orders and won't change their behaviour, then I'm going to come and get them. But I think there's a difference between jumping in a convoy and heading off to Rostov-on-Don and then rolling on towards Moscow. And I think the fact that they did manage to cover 500 kilometres, in very short order, basically waved through checkpoints by regular Russian army, by Putin's own National Guard. Gave this a real momentum.
That was Matthew Sussex, a security analyst at the Griffith Asia Institute, speaking to our reporter, Jaime Ocon. It's been 6 years since the Me Too movement exploded onto the world's consciousness. Women in many countries have shared their experiences of sexual harassment and violence. But at a social level, has anything really changed? And what are the prospects for Taiwan's own Me Too movement? Louise Watt reports.
In 2017, a tweet started a revolution. US actress Alyssa Milano wrote on Twitter, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply." It was a reaction to allegations against a titan of Hollywood, film producer Harvey Weinstein. Thousands of women, including celebrities, shared their stories of sexual harassment and abuse, marking a sea change.
There is good reason also for victims today to feel more confident that if they speak out, they are more likely to be believed.
A number of powerful men, including Weinstein, lost their jobs. And the once influential film executive will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, convicted of rape and sexual assault. In the United States, Me Too led to lasting legal changes.
It is definitely easier for victims to access the courts. It's easier for them to reliably get the information that they need from other victims and to speak freely about what happened to them, free from non-disclosure agreements or other contractual tools that employers have used in the past to squelch victims and prevent them from speaking out.
The Me Too movement spread quickly around the world, but took longer to get to East Asia, where women have less influence in politics and society. Out of 146 countries, South Korea ranks at 105 for parity between men and women, and Japan 125. In South Korea, Me Too kicked off when a prosecutor accused a superior of groping her.
어떤 제 개인을 위해서가 아니라 제가 입을 다물고 참고 넘어간다면 앞으로도 또 후배들이 그런 일을 당할까 봐 사실 걱정이 됐고요.
The prosecutor she accused, An Tae-gun, was sentenced to 2 years in prison for abuse of power, but his conviction was later quashed. While Me Too has thrown light on systemic problems within South Korea and Japan, activists in Asia see change as coming slowly to the region.
I feel like in Asia, it's different because a lot of the sort of like ingrained patriarchy and gender norms are very, how do you say it? They used to be accepted parts of this culture. Whereas I feel like in the US, there was a lot more sort of societal recognition around the oppression that women face in general in society.
Now, thanks to a Netflix political drama and a subplot about sexual harassment, Me Too is exploding in Taiwan, regarded as one of Asia's most progressive nations. Dozens of women and some men have made allegations against high-profile figures in politics, entertainment, and the justice system.
So people will say that, gender equality is not an issue in Taiwan. We have a female president. We have the highest rates of female participation in politics at the national level. Like, we don't have an issue with gender equality. And as the Me Too movement has shown, yes, we do. We need to acknowledge the problem before we can address it.
6 years after Me Too exploded in the West, allegations of sexual misconduct are only just surging in Taiwan. As prosecutors begin looking at cases, activists hope this wave may lead to permanent social change. Eason Pan and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
The Me Too movement's effects are starting to be felt here. Taiwan's ruling party has been fined $29,000 for failing to properly handle sexual harassment allegations. Taipei City's Labor Bureau announced the fine on Monday, saying the Democratic Progressive Party did not do enough to protect a former staffer who who told party officials that she had been sexually harassed. The alleged incident took place last September. The woman says a member of a film crew touched her inappropriately while they were riding together in a car. She says she discussed the incident with then DPP Women's Development Head Xu Jintian, but says her allegations were not taken seriously. The DPP says it respects the Labor Bureau's decision and will do more to educate its members on proper workplace behavior. The victims of a gas explosion in northern Hsinchu County are forming a mutual aid association. The group will work to get compensation from the local government. A series of gas leaks, fires, and explosions took place in Hsinchu's Zhubei city on Saturday, injuring 6 people. One teenager suffered burns over 90% of his body. Several residential buildings were also damaged or destroyed. The Hsinchu Gas Company, which runs the city's gas supply, belongs to the local government. The head of the firm has promised that everyone affected will be compensated. Meanwhile, the county is giving each person whose home was damaged just under $40 for each day they have to live in temporary housing. Elite cyclists in Taiwan challenge a lung-busting bike ride. Details after the break. Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Over the past few months, China and India have been kicking out each other's journalists. This is the latest sign of simmering tensions between the two countries. But a recent development could signal better relations ahead. Shubham Paul has more.
China and India are next-door neighbors. They are also major trading partners and account for almost a third of the global population. But soon, there may be no journalists from either country reporting from the other's soil. The two sides have been expelling each other's foreign correspondents, a sign of worsening ties.
To my mind, very unusual, because I can't remember when this was the case last time. You could enlighten me on that. In peacetime.
Now only one reporter from each side remains in their post, and even that could soon change. Earlier in June, the last Indian journalist in China was told he could no longer stay. The Beijing correspondent for the Press Trust of India, the country's largest news agency, was given until the end of the month to pack up and leave. But a new development has led some to believe things could soon improve. A source close to the matter told TaiwanPlus that the Press Trust of India's journalist in Beijing is being allowed to stay an extra month. But the source says whether he will be allowed to stay after that will depend on the Indian government's decision to allow the last Chinese state media reporters stay in Delhi. To understand how India and China got to this point, it's important to know a bit of their recent history. The two share a long land border, parts of which are contested. Soldiers from both countries have been stationed around the most sensitive areas and have sometimes clashed. Adil Brar, an Indian scholar based in Taiwan, says recent tensions can be traced back to a fight between Indian and Chinese soldiers in the area around Doklam in 2017.
There was tension building up between India and China if you go back to 2017 when we had the Doklam standoff. So the issue around visa access is part of a broader geopolitical tension, as well as the tension at the border between India and China.
Things continued to get worse until an even bloodier clash erupted in Galwan in June 2020, leading to the deaths of dozens of troops. It was around then that the two governments began targeting journalists' visas. India has accused China of not providing a good working environment for its reporters.
Several restrictions, that is, Indian journalists in China face several restrictions while getting access and traveling locally within China.
But China says it's India that's mistreating its journalists. It's called on its neighbor to come to the table.
中方愿继续本着相互尊重、平等互利的原则，同英方保持沟通。
It's unclear what next steps either side will take, but many hope that the two countries can begin resolving their differences and allow each other's journalists to keep reporting important stories from within each other's borders. Devin Sai and Shubham Pal for TaiwanPlus.
A study done on the iconic Taipei 101 skyscraper by a Taiwan university and a top research center could help enhance building safety across the country. Joyce Zeng reports.
Taipei 101, an icon of the city's skyline. It's Taiwan's tallest building, with a fitting name for boasting 101 floors above ground. Many people know it as a shopping mall, but now it's also the site of a study by earth scientists from National Taiwan Normal University and the country's top research institute, Academia Sinica. Their study even made the cover of the American Science journal, the BSSA. What they found is the more people there are inside the building, the greater the whole structure's vibrations.
人流的话算是比较新的发现，人流比较多，这个时候它一定这晃动程度似乎是比较大。
Each building has its own frequency of vibration, or a specific rate it can sway when subjected to an external force. In a nutshell, what the researchers found was that when it's hotter, Taipei's 101's frequencies go up, but when it's windier, the amount it shakes actually goes down.
风在推动这个建筑物的时候，在建筑里面会造成很微小的裂隙，性质一旦改变的话，它就会改变这整个筷子它震动的方式跟它震动的大小。
It's important for a building's frequency to be greater than a possible external force to make sure it stays standing. But frequencies change as structures get older, and in Taiwan's subtropical climate, which sees extremes from hot, humid summers to earthquakes and typhoons, monitoring the structural integrity is key to safety. Scientists behind the Taipei 101 study say that their findings can help improve the safety of other buildings, like these ones. Most people in the city live in older structures like these that have clearer material decay. Taipei has struggled to get residents on board to ensure building safety. About 40% of the city's apartments have yet to file public safety reports, which were due back in April. Having now studied the country's tallest structure, scientists are encouraging local officials to adapt their methods to convince residents of the urgency to care for their buildings. Scott Huang and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
In sports, a shakeup is coming to one of Taiwan's professional basketball leagues. A new company is taking over one of the T1 League's teams. The league says Taixing Holdings will take over the Taiwan Beer Hero Bears from the start of the next season. The team will continue to be based in Taipei. Taixing already runs a team in the rival Plus League. All T1 teams have a corporate backer. Taiwan Beer is in talks with Bank Sinopac to jointly sponsor the Taoyuan Leopards, which is also in the T1 League. Over 400 elite cyclists converged on eastern Taiwan on Monday for one of the world's toughest bike races, the King of the Mountains Challenge. If you're looking for a bike race which really takes things up a notch, the Taiwan King of the Mountains Challenge might be for you. Because this one-day road race is not for the faint of heart. The lung-busting event is a closed-road hill climbing competition, which requires cyclists to bike their way from sea level up to the Wuling Mountain Pass in Taiwan's central mountain range. The course is ranked one of the world's 10 most difficult routes by French cycling magazine Le Cycle.
新来地爬坡一定要训练，有没有信心？有，没问题。第一次啊？对。为什么会知道有这样的一个比赛？
有在骑车都会知道，想要来挑战看看。
The race took place in Hualien on Monday. It started at a local elementary school and was all uphill from there for over 105 kilometers, reaching elevations of close to 3,300 meters. But it isn't also pain-inducing. Along the way, cyclists have the chance to experience the amazing beauty of Taroko Gorge and Hehuan Mountain National Park, if they have the energy to look around, that is. And there's no shortage of people ready to take on the challenge.
在我们夏季的部分，总共大概420位，那其中大概100位左右是来自于有17个国家的参加者。
The triumphant moment as Li Tingwei of Taiwan crossed the finish line to win the men's race. Li made it through the scorching plains and freezing peaks to finish first in just under 3 hours and 40 minutes. And while he's happy with his success, his legs will probably be feeling differently the next morning. Entertainment news. An immersive theater production in Taipei has brought together some of the country's top performers. The unique show features performances by local dancers, acrobats, drag queens, and musicians.
Is that this production is locally produced, and everyone that's a part of the production is based here in Taiwan and is an artist, working professional here in Taiwan. So we've got that local flavor, but that international standard. The Night Witch is a show based around Lilith, a female demon from Jewish folklore. It was first produced by the Lilithverse production team in 2021, and the team is presenting again with a new twist. Unlike most other theater performances, this one invites audience members to be part of the show, giving guests a more interactive experience. They're free to follow any of the characters as they seek to find out which one is the real Lilith. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, check out these shots from the annual LGBTQ Pride Parade in New York City. I'm Eric Gao. Take care and see you next time.